just didn't auction that off. They probably could have got something out of it.
Yeah.
Because they seized pretty much everything he had.
Okay, well, welcome to Tom's Guitar Show. I'm Tom. They call me Guitar Tom. Because I'm often seen with a guitar. And they call me on the phone and they ask me, they say, hey man, what's your show about anyway? I say, oh, it's about an hour. It's about an hour. It's about guitar players, guitar playing, all things guitaristic. So, here's the thing. If you want to call the show, there'll be a number on your screen inevitably. You can dial that number. You can ask me a question about care and feeding of your guitar. What kind of guitar is right for you? How to play the guitar, that's a good question. Maybe some related topic like the guitarrón, the sitar, the guitarra, lutes, uds, vihuelas, banjos, balalaikas, bouzouki, bajos, sextos, tiples, cavaquinhos, ukuleles, banjolales, banjolins, mandolins, mandors, mandolas, mandocellos, harpsichords, harmoniums, harmonicas. I guess, anything you can pluck on or blow on or hit with a mallet to make music. Want to push a button and make some music? That's cool, man. Keys, whatever, Politics, world events, your own personality problems. That's fine too, but keep it clean. This is a family program. Okay.
Speaking of politics,
Yeah.
Before the show you were mentioning you had a little problem getting to the musicians on YouTube this week.
Well, every time I have to look at a video, I get a attack ad by Joni Ernst talking about Bruce Braley. It was this veteran who was talking about how he missed all the votes and stuff. But the thing is, I saw the same ad every time I went to see like a music video or like little video of something from the 60s or 70s or whatever. Every time I went to a video, there would be this same guy, and I started wondering if he was actually really a veteran or what if he was I don't know. But it's counterproductive because if this kind of attack ad, I'm not necessarily going to, every time I want to see a video, if I see an attack ad that's kind of disgusting, I don't really it doesn't endear me to the candidate. So, I mean, 'tis the season.
I thought that this weekend. Do you hear Harkin this weekend? So it doesn't matter if Joni Ernst is pretty as Taylor Swift and nice as Mr. Rogers. Remind me in '08, was it '08? When McCain ran.
Yeah.
And he showed a picture of Britney Spears and Paris Hilton and said, "You don't vote for the world's biggest celebrity."
Ah,
He forgot that both of them, Harkin and McCain, forgot us Americans love our celebrities.
I see. I didn't even see that comment. I just saw the headline that he had apologized
Yeah.
for saying.
Yeah, everybody kicked up a fuss, so he said, "Well, sorry I said that."
Huh. Why did they kick up a fuss, or was it just?
Who knows? Everybody gets offended when the other guy says something.
Yeah. There's some guy. I think he's an Australian journalist. He was interviewing this woman who was, basically. Well, she said that he was because he's a white man, he couldn't possibly understand what people of color go through, or something like that, or couldn't understand the point of view. He said that he may be a white man, but he's perfectly capable of understanding things. And then, and she became offended about something, and she says, "I understand your point of view. I just think it's stupid." And then she took umbrage, and then he said that she was a professional umbrage taker. And I think, and it's what she is. It was Sui Park, I guess. I think she's like a Korean American.
Oh.
But her whole thing is to take offense, mostly at white men. And when you think about it, you say, well, okay, but if you take offense at just automatically take offense at white men, or just keeps going on and on about how bad white men are, people might point out and say, you're a racist and a sexist, but
And what they need to think about is that white guys still have the vote.
that's right. Some of us vote, I guess. I was born this way. I got no ill will against anybody else because of their gender.
But, we're 46, 47% of the population. You want to throw that away before the election.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, some of us are nice,
That is a general rule. I think people of Asian descent usually do better in this country than pretty much anybody else.
Well, there's another thing about that, because she's playing this poor downtrodden minority card, from this making his videos in what looked like a really nice fancy house, and if you look at the income, of different demographics, some people, and she's in a demographic that does very well. They're well above average, she can. There are other people who don't do so well as far as their income and advancement.
There I am.
Yeah. But she's in actually a privileged.
Yeah.
She's in a privileged demographic. So some people do very well, immigrants and like first, second generation, and East Asians and certainly South Asians have done very well in this country. Like people from India do very well.
Yeah.
There are people who've been here for hundreds of years who, don't do that well as demographics. And of course, the natives who've been here for thousands of years.
Right.
Don't do that well at all, really, a lot of them. Demographic.
Yeah, well, it kind of depends. The Native Americans, the Indians, those that have assimilated into the society at large do fine. It's those that are still living out on the reservation that.
Yeah.
A lot of poverty on a lot of the reservations.
Yeah. Well, I've read something about these things. Like not all Asians do well. Koreans do quite well, and Chinese do quite well. Cambodians and Laotians don't do that well in this country. Economically, and among Malcolm Gladwell wrote this thing. It's about the actually immigrants from the what they call the West Indies, like Jamaicans, Trinidad, places, Tobago, whatever. Those people do quite well. They do as well as the Koreans do, and in this country. Whereas other people of African descent who have been here for hundreds of years, they don't do as well. So Nigerians, as far as people of African, people who are actually from Africa. Nigerian immigrants do quite well in this country. They do well in education.
At home, there are an awful lot of Nigerian princes that keep asking me to send them my bank account number so they can send me some money.
They're going to send you millions.
Yeah.
You should give them your number right away, But
they can't get it out of the country without my bank account, and I get to keep 10% of whatever they ship through it.
I get those sometimes. So I wonder, how can I be so lucky? It's just I never get around to quite filling the thing out. So I didn't delete the emails, but well, maybe they're smart, and they think you're stupid or we're stupid anyway. So No, Nigerians do quite well, apparently. Immigrants do, in education and going into professions.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I mean, there's demographics. I know some people that hate statistics, but it's interesting, to note that, some people just do well. The Irish used to do very badly, and now they're above average. People. But of course, they're totally assimilated.
Right.
Nobody cares if you're Irish.
And most of them aren't that Irish anymore.
No, they're
They married Germans and French and Italians and Polish.
a lot of Germans.
Yeah, but if they have an Irish name, they still call themselves Irish.
Even if they don't, they want to call themselves Irish.
Because somebody brings that up every St. Patrick's Day. There are more people in the USA that call themselves Irish than there are people living in Ireland.
That's right. Well, there are more people of Irish extraction in the United States than there are living in Ireland.
Right.
Because so many of them left. Many of them left the hard way, and some of them left other ways.
Right.
But,
Yeah, I know the potato famine over there drove an awful lot of them over here.
yeah, but even before that, there was ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
In fact, the potato famine is really a part of that whole ethnic cleansing land grab thing,
Right.
because they were producing, at least they were producing a lot of beef, for instance, at that time, but for export to England.
Well, and wheat and corn, but that all belonged to the landowners.
Right. So
The Irish were sharecroppers living on the potatoes they could grow.
Yeah, they gave them a little plot to grow potatoes so they could survive. So they lived on potatoes and buttermilk. And when there's a potato famine, they starved, but they wouldn't share the other,
Offered to sell them the wheat and corn, but they had no money. So
Right. Yeah. So they died like flies. And I've read a lot about the potato famine, and lately I've been reading about Irish slavery, people who were enslaved as part of ethnic cleansing and sent to the West Indies to work, and to Brazil too, lots of large numbers. And they weren't indentured servants; they were actual slaves and registered as livestock. And I read the documents, and they called them livestock. But there's a lot of that deporting hundreds of thousands, maybe a million people out of a population of 3 million. To be slaves, and then of course marginalizing those who remained and so forth. But anyway.
Anyway, we've kind of run far afield here.
Yeah.
Maybe you should tell us about your guitar.
Well, this is my this is a Godin Kingpin. Kingpin 1, I guess it is. Kingpin. It's a basically has a P90 pickup, one pickup. It's a hollow body, made in Canada. Fairly deep, not extremely deep, but fits an acoustic guitar like a Dreadnought acoustic guitar case. And basically, this is what electric guitars were like in the 40s. I've had it on the show before, but I love this guitar. I love the other one I brought too, and I'll play that in a minute. But this is a what I've discovered though is this Vox amp that I'm using over here. Which is it's an English company. I believe this one's made in Vietnam. But, it's a small world after all. Oops, there we go. There we go, a little Vox amp there. This amp, for some reason, doesn't have the terrible hum issue because this guitar with one P90, and P90 is a big fat single coil pickup, so it picks up the fluorescent lights that I'm under, the Wi-Fi from the computers I'm surrounded by, whatever else, current. This amp is really pretty good, and at home, it actually doesn't hum on this amp, and everything else hums horribly. In other places, like at my studio, the room I teach at Co, it's quite quiet on any amp. But if I take the hum debugger off, it hums. But I put the hum debugger on, and now I'm fine. Anyway, I'm going to make a loop. I'm tired of talking about all this stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, it's a nice guitar. One thing it does is sort of, it's closer to like an acoustic guitar sound than a real electric guitar sound. It's kind of in between, you know, because some guitars are, you know, like I've got a guitar at home. I really like it. I'll probably bring it. I've had it at the show before. I'll probably bring it back again. I'm probably going to restring it first, though, because strings make a huge difference.
Can you unplug that and play it as an acoustic guitar?
I can turn down the volume and play it as an acoustic guitar like this. See, now the volume's off, and it's like a.
Or with the solid body guitar, you wouldn't get near that sound out of it?
No, and it would be there are, of course, archtop guitars. This is well, history as I understand it, is that years ago, like 1940s, they started putting pickups, actually in the 1930s, they started putting pickups on guitars. But before that, like in 1920s, they started building these archtop. Gibson started building these archtop guitars. Because it's called archtop because it's curved. Now, if you've ever been up and close and personal with a violin or a cello, and I have a violin and a cello at home, and a string bass, they have curved, tops and bottoms. The top and the back are curved.
Yeah.
They're carved out of a piece of wood. I mean, unless it's really cheap, in which case it's pressed plywood. But that's part of the sound of a violin, is that curvedness. And then so they started doing that with mandolins, and of course the mandolin is very closely related to the violin. It's tuned the same way and stuff. And but then like in the 20s, like in the 20s, the banjo was the main jazz instrument. I mean, for as far as the strumming was concerned, the strumming part of a jazz band. So there's this sort of thing. In the early 20s, you hear the band, they have like a tuba playing the bass, and they have a banjo strumming the chords, and of course horns and drums and stuff. But like after about 1926, which is sort of this thing shifted, and the tuba was out of the band, the string bass was in, which is still today the very bass.
In a jazz combo, they usually have a string bass.
Yeah, usually have a string bass, and occasionally they have a bass guitar, which is way cool too, but mostly string bass. And then of course they have a guitar. And, you see in Dixieland jazz bands, you still see the banjo, and tuba, but that was the instrumentation. So things changed.
And the piano.
And the piano, of course, but the thing is that the guitar at that time, in the old days was smaller, more intimate thing, and it wasn't very loud. And I have a couple of historical ones. I've done a few shows, there's a show a long time ago where I brought out all these different guitars, and I had like 20 guitars on the show, and I played through them and explained their kind of history, because I have some antiques and some, replicas of older guitars. So anyway, they started making guitars bigger, like the Dreadnought, which is the most popular acoustic guitar shape now. It's kind of square, kind of squarish. It's named after a battleship, which is a Dreadnought class of iron battleship, which was a thing that was really pretty effective against wooden ships, because it was a big iron ship, in the late 19th century. Big transition thing. No sails, all steam powered, But then so the Dreadnought was named after a battleship, but then the archtop, Gibson started building his archtop guitars. Lloyd Loar was involved. He was the great acoustic scientist or whatever who made Gibsons, better. Anyway, so the archtop guitar, because this is curved, on the top, you can see that. A little curve to it, and it has F holes like a violin or cello does, as opposed to a round or oval sound hole, which would be more common in guitars. So they had those, and they were louder, more punchy than the little guitars they had before, so it could keep up with all those horns. But then people started messing around with like taking apart radios, which are of course exploded in popularity in the 1920s and certainly the 1930s. So they started using radio parts and making amplifiers and pickups for them, because what this is about, is that how this works is it has a magnet and a copper wire coiled around a magnet. So the vibration of the string over the magnet causes a electronic
induces current.
It generates electricity. It moves like electrons. Yeah. So and then that's amplified through this amplifier over here. So people figured this out, and they started putting pickups on archtops, and then and then of course he went into business. So in the 1940s, the electric guitar would be like this, pretty much. This would be a very common sort of design for electric guitar. Gibson made them. People still play them as antiques and stuff. And then of course in the at the same time, like in the 30s, Rickenbacker came up with the Hawaiian guitar and the steel guitar were very popular. Yeah. So like lap steels and stuff. No traditional country band would be,
right after World War II, there were a lot of those.
Yeah.
Lap guitars.
Well, they were very popular. They became very popular, starting in the 30s and going on. But Rickenbacker made one called a frying pan one, which is like it was like a frying pan. It was round and had a neck on it, and of course you play it with a slide. And I've had one. I think I brought it on the show before. I have a what's called a PV power slide, which is like a lap steel, but you can strap it on, so it's like electric dobro type of thing. And anyway, so Leo Fender, like 1950 or so, made a solid body electric guitar. People scoffed at it because anybody with a bandsaw could make one. Just cut out a slab of wood. And I've had many Telecasters. It became the Telecaster in '52, I think. He called it a Broadcaster, but some other company had that name, so he had to change the name of it. Yeah. So there's like the really valuable ones are the no-name ones he made for a while before he came up with the name Telecaster. So like 1951 or so, or early '52. Then it became the Telecaster in 1952, and we have very popular. I have a whole bunch of them actually, different configurations. I no longer have an actual Fender Telecaster made in the U.S. I have a couple Mexican ones. I have a G&L made in the U.S. I have G&Ls made in Indonesia. But anyway, what I'm nattering on about is that, yeah, the solid body came in to kind of, I think it probably came around before that, was invented before that, but it came into popularity in the 1950s. And that's mainly what you see here.
And by the 60s, they'd pretty much taken over rock and roll.
Yeah. Well, in the old days of rock and roll, the saxophone was a real contender for the solo. But, time passed.
But then the Beatles came along, and it's guitar bands.
Yeah. Well, there were guitar bands before that. Buddy Holly played a guitar and stuff in the 50s and stuff. But there was somebody who there's a letter that's I've seen, copies. There's somebody who was rejecting the Beatles and say, well, I didn't like this about it like that. And besides, guitar bands are on the way out. Yeah. This is like in the early 60s.
There's a prophet.
Yeah, before they got signed. But rejecting the Beatles. And so, there are a lot of those people who reject things.
Yeah.
Anyway. Anyway.
Well, kind of like the Newsweek critic that when he saw Elvis said there's no market for the hillbilly howler.
Yeah, right. One of the most, the king of, a king. He was one of the most popular acts ever in the history of the world. So somebody said, forget it. Anyway, well, it's funny how that works. I've seen a bunch of these, people thinking rock and roll would be a passing fad in about 1954 when it started out. And rock and roll was basically born about the same time as the Stratocaster was born, which is, Stratocaster came out a couple of years after the Telecaster was named as such. And it's the most popular electric guitar, or probably guitar, I guess, the most often copied design. I have a bunch of those too. I've been bringing them on the show lately, but Mexican-made ones, but I do have an American-made Fender Stratocaster, and I love it dearly. But anyway, but this is like a 1940s electric guitar. So it's like, I don't know. It's great. But I'm going to switch guitars anyway because, got to do something interesting. Probably nobody else. There are people out there who find this sort of stuff fascinating. Not many, but there are. So.
This is a guitar show. If they're watching us, it must be what they want to see.
Well, yeah. The show is about guitar players and guitar playing and all things guitaristic. Yeah. It's Tom's Guitar Show. It's not as appealing as like a cooking show because most people like to eat. Yeah. And of course, a lot of people like guitar music. Some people are interested in how it's made. The whole premise of this show 20 years ago when I started it was that a lot of what people were seeing, and of course I was teaching guitar lessons. I've been teaching guitar lessons since I was in high school, but a lot of what people were seeing like on MTV at that time, because MTV used to be a music. See, what a lot of people don't know is it stands for music television.
Yeah, when it started out, it was all music videos.
Yeah, well, that was what it was.
Back in the 80s.
Yeah, that's what it was about. But
we were no longer young by then, but
well,
presumably, maybe some of our audience wasn't even born yet then.
A lot of them probably weren't. MTV. My story about MTV was I played a gig at Alibaba's Cafe in Mill Valley, California, for my 25th birthday. And it was on a Sunday, and the 49ers had just won the Super Bowl with Joe Montana throwing the ball, And it was a big, happy event. Sorry. You wonder why I do this. That's a tuning fork over the. Anyway, so on my 25th birthday, I played a gig. They had a big screen TV, which was not that common in those days. It was a projector TV for the football game. 49ers won. They rolled up the screen. I started playing guitar. I was wearing a suit my parents had sent me for my birthday. And didn't have any nice shoes, though, so I had the $15, and I bought a pair of Keds canvas sneakers. They'd be, at least $50 now.
Yeah.
But anyway, talking ancient history. And MTV was a new thing, not well known. And in the audience, there were a couple of producers for MTV who were there, and so they told the guy, I never met him, but they told the guy who got me the gig, who was kind of like sort of managing me, that I should get it together and make music videos, because they see what they could do. And so I lost weight. Not that I needed to at the time, and I found myself sleeping on couches and stuff and playing gigs for like $25 a night, and running out of things. And so I went back to Iowa and kind of forgot about it, because I've heard a lot of stuff, People say, yeah, because I'd been actually burned many times by that time in show business. By the time I was 25, I'd been burned, quite a few times actually. So I didn't think much of it. I was just trying to survive and stuff. And so I went back to Iowa, and it was kind of an interesting story. This gig, it was a very happy gig. Everybody's happy to have won the Super Bowl, and they had this newfangled wine called White Zinfandel, which was actually pretty good in the old days. Now it's like soda pop, I guess. I don't know much about it, but anyway. So then I got home, and I got cable TV, and lo and behold, there was MTV. And they had these videos like the Cars, and they were doing. This guy was like singing kind of oddly, and have young women with very short shorts leaning on the fenders of shiny cars from the 50s, and they were singing their songs. And of course, the guy was holding the guitar, but not playing it, because I know what it looks like when you play a guitar. See, because I've taught thousands of lessons, and I've watched guitar players. So anyway, so the end of my boring story is that I missed out on MTV when it started. But now it wouldn't matter anymore anyway, probably. But who knows? Maybe I could be a has-been. I could be out at the casino playing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of those, well, early and even later guys on MTV had one-hit wonders.
Yeah.
They were a big deal in the 80s, and you never heard from them again.
That's right. Well, that's been going on for forever.
Yeah.
But see, I don't know what the point of life is. If I ever figure it out, I'll let you know. But I've never arrived. Every day I try to play some guitar.
Now you do still play gigs, don't you?
I still play gigs. Yeah.
What are you going to do this week?
Well, this week's pretty tame as far as I'm concerned. I'll just do my usual Friday and Saturday night at the Tuscan Moon in beautiful downtown Kelowna, Iowa, right next to the bakery. Supposed to start at 6, so I'll get there maybe 6:30 if I'm lucky, and I'll probably play till about 10. And I believe we're getting into the busy season. It was actually quite dead on Friday, and Saturday I had a party. And the party I played, I started at 6:02, and I got done playing at 11:46. And I took about 10 minutes off in the middle to eat some sushi, but played basically the whole time, just banging out tunes. But anyway, so I wasn't there last Saturday, but I heard it was going to be really busy. It was really dead on Friday.
Yeah.
But I think we're starting to get into that holiday season thing. So a lot of people want to go out to dinner and, celebrate things. And so I say get reservations. So I'll be at the Tuscan Moon in Kelowna, doing my thing. And then 10:30 at Journey Church in Coralville. I don't think I've got anything else coming up imminently that's of any... yeah, I think that's it. I had a whole bunch of gigs in a short amount of time. But now if anybody wants to hire me for their Christmas party, my advice is do it on a Sunday or a Thursday. But
and if they'd like to see your act, this Friday or Saturday at the Tuscan Moon in Kelowna.
That's right. That's the place to go. Have a nice dinner. It's not really an act, though. What I do is I provide like background music, but it's a little bit more. I try to make it more than that. So
don't want to play elevator music.
Yeah. Well, actually, I was playing I was doing this church gig I do, and the preacher, he started. I was playing the Autumn Leaves, which I've I've worked up an arrangement on. Now, I actually haven't sat home and practiced it. I've always done it when I'm in front of people, which is kind of weird, but so I have the Autumn Leaves. So I was playing that, and then the preacher got on the congas, because they have little congas in the corner just in case, and so he starts playing along with it a little bit. He says, we could do a lounge act. I was thinking, is that lounge music? Is that insulting or not? Is it, if I called it smooth jazz, would that be insulting or not?
Stop down at the casino and ask them if they need a lounge act.
Yeah, well, I've been in communication with the casino, but the guy calls me up for various things, but he's never hired me, so I submitted a bid for a big party. But anyway, but yeah, I don't know, maybe I should have an act. What do you think? Anyway, this is a DBZ, not DBZ, this is a G&L. It's called a Fallout. And G&L stands for George and Leo, so it was Leo Fender and George somebody who, because Leo Fender...
He'd sold his name?
Yeah, he sold his name in '65 or something like that, and then he worked for Music Man, or did stuff for Music Man, and then he continued to design guitars, and then somewhere later on in the '70s or something, he started G&L with this guy George, his partner. And Leo has moved on, shall we say, shed his mortal coil. But the L for Leo, Leo Fender still remains in G&L. And this guitar is actually, the pickups and the hardware are made in the U.S. And I believe the final assembly is made in the U.S., but the body and neck were made in Indonesia, which lowers the price significantly. But this is one that I guess this is an older design that they were making in the U.S. years ago, and they revived it, but making it in Asia. So it's a smaller body, like one of the smaller ones in the '60s, like the Mustang or whatever, and has a sort of a Telecaster-ish neck on it. And then the pickups, there's a P90, which is the same pickup that I have on this at the neck, which is the same location. Which is what I'm doing now. This guitar is a little bit more sharp in its tone than the hollow body there. And then the neck the bridge pickup down here is a humbucker. Anyway, so and also if I want to split this pickup to make it a single coil, so it's like a Telecaster has a single coil very close to the bridge, I can pull this little knob out, and I get this. That sounds a lot like a Telecaster in that position, that pickup position. If I wanted to put distortion on my amp and stuff, I could leave it in the double coil mode. It's a lot more powerful. So double coil, split, it's thinner. Double coil, big difference. And I can also, split the coil and then mix the P90 and this one. I get this. If I put this back in, I get the double coil and the P90. Very different. And of course, here's my P90 all by itself. So if I were going to play this guitar all night, I would use a different amp and set it up differently. But, you know, it's like 5 guitars because I got the single coil bridge pickup. I got the humbucker double coiled bridge pickup. I got the 2 pickups together. That's 3. I got the two pickups with this in a single coil mode. That's 4. And then I got the P90 here at the neck all by itself. So that's 5 different possibilities. Each one quite different in what it does. The amp I'm using right now really goes well with the hollow body guitar. It's fine with this one, but I can do better as far as because once you get the amp, then once you get the guitar, the amp, and then whatever kind of effects you put in between the amp and the thing, all I've got here is the humdiebugger and the looper. But anyway, yeah, it's okay. They can see it here. It's good enough. But yeah, that's good enough. Anyway, so. I was talking about how I got all these political attack ads every time I went on YouTube. Tried to watch a YouTube video last night, but the reason I was watching all these YouTube videos is I was thinking a lot about guitar players like Red Shea, and Red Shea was Gordon Lightfoot's guitar player. Gordon Lightfoot played pretty decent guitar, finger picking and strumming, a lot of big strummy stuff on a 12 string. And then of course he sang and he wrote the songs. But he always had these two sidemen. He'd have the bass player, and I can't remember the bass player's name. He's pretty good. He actually went through a number of bass players, but for a long period, when he was really, when Gordon Lightfoot was really big, like when he was doing like Sundown and If You Could Read My Mind and those songs.
Edmund Fitzgerald.
Well, before that,
Oh.
that was 80s. But these like late 60s, early 70s.
Oh.
During that era, he had Red Shea, and. So I'd known I'd seen Red Shea on albums and stuff. So when I was a kid, or when I was a young fella, I had a couple of Gordon Lightfoot records. I had Gord's Gold in the 70s, and it was, and I like Gordon Lightfoot. I like his songwriting. I think his chord structure stuff is interesting, and his lyrics are interesting and good, and he's a good songwriter and an interesting singer, so you have to kind of get used to his voice being sort of different, but what really attracts me to stuff a lot of times is a really cool guitar part, because I always see, actually, when I was a young fella, my ambition was to be the other guy, to be like Red Shea. So you have the other guy, the
Be the
singer-songwriter.
side man for the singer.
Yeah. So the big guy is the guy who takes all the emotional risks and writes all these songs, about love affairs gone astray and stuff like that. Is there, and then there's another guy off to the side and behind a little bit. Playing all kinds of fancy, tasty guitar parts. And I want to be that guy. I didn't want to be Gordon Lightfoot. I want to be Red Shea.
Well, it's pretty common for the singer just to be playing rhythm and
Right.
alongside him be playing lead.
Right. Well, because the singer's pretty busy, actually. But it's amazing he played guitar as well as he did when he was singing like that. But Gordon Lightfoot was, and I guess still is, quite good, actually. Quite good. But anyway, and nothing against Gordon Lightfoot's guitar playing, because it was really good and solid and everything like that, and imaginative. But the other guy was just great, and he made it look really easy what he was doing. So when I was listening to these things, I heard a Gordon Lightfoot song somewhere a couple weeks ago, and that made me think about it a little bit, and I've been sort of doing this in my mind. I remember that I wanted to be that sideman. The other thing I remember is that I guess I've learned a whole bunch of these licks because I incorporate a lot of the same kinds of licks that Red Shea used. They're sort of like. That stuff, like. I learned a lot from that because I was mostly a classical guitarist, but I was learning this sort of ear stuff, from listening to those. So. I found that very interesting. I was, at times I would be the only time I've really gotten my ambition was I was doing things with Raimundo Rosales, and we were Raimundo y Tomás. So I was the Red Shea, but I was like a Mexican Red Shea because we were doing the Mexican stuff. We were going table to table in restaurants and playing parties and stuff. Raimundo and I were, and I got to do that fancy
Red
stuff.
O'Shea-o.
The what?
Red O'Shea-o.
Red O'Shea, yeah, right. But he. Mundo would sing and play pretty decent folk guitar, and I played all the fancy stuff. But we did it in a Latin context. Yeah. And so anyway, the other guy was Maury, and I got to learn the guy's last name, who was with Jim Croce, and died in the same plane crash that Jim Croce died in, along with a few others. This guy was like a bona fide musical genius, apparently, and he did all that fancy guitar picking. But no, Jim Croce was good. He was a good guitar player. He did finger picking with the finger picks, and did a lot of some strummy stuff and a lot of finger picking stuff, and it was very good. And he wrote the songs, of course. But the other guy did all that really cool stuff, and I would like to have been him, except I didn't want to get killed in a plane crash. I'm sure he didn't either. But anyway, it's interesting. I'm going to do some tweets about this, I think, and link, because the one thing I found interesting was watching actual footage of these people performing. I was telling you before the show about Gordon Lightfoot that in his records they had all those violins and stuff, and all that big production, a lot of weeby violins, like 101 strings or something behind him. But when he was playing these gigs, he had just this guitar player and himself on the guitar, 6 and 12 string guitars going between, and you could hear the difference, 12-string he strummed and made big, jangly, lush chords, and the 6-string he basically finger-picked. We had Red Shea and then a bass player who was doing very interesting stuff on it, playing a lot out of a bass guitar, just 3 of them. And it was very full and very interesting. So I found that interesting because I've been familiar with his songs and I've heard the records he did in those days. And I guess Gordon's still out there doing it. He's like 75 years old now and doesn't look all that healthy, but he's still doing it. And then, of course, Jim Croce, it was just the 2 of them, Jim Croce and this other guitar player doing their thing. And, so Jim Croce be going like a... Uptown skies, hustlers, Bowery's got its bums. 42nd Street got Big Jimmy Walker, he's a bold, pushing son of a gun. Well, he's big and dumb as a bird. Big and dumb as a man can come, but he's stronger than a country horse. When the bad folks all get together at night, they all call Big Jim boy. Everybody says, "See, Jack." They say, "You don't turn to Superman's case," like that. But the other guy was like a. Doing that. That looks like a lot of fun, being the other guy. Yeah. I know you don't get paid as much, but
you find yourself a singer.
What?
You need to find yourself a singer.
I suppose, yeah. After hearing me sing, you probably, yeah. I've also done the other thing where I had a female vocalist, and like the Tuck and Patty thing where I play fancy guitar and then there'd be a singer up front. But none of these acts ever last very long for me, so I can always depend on myself showing up,
And your boomerang.
And my bloopers. Screwed it up. Music to rake by.
We're almost out.
Yeah. The show's almost over now, is it? Might as well play it. Well, I'll be back next week. 2 weeks, we're having our annual meeting, so I won't be here. I'll be at the annual meeting at the Mill.